So when you're thinking about change in an organization, what's more effective? A change program that's pushed by someone who's a technology solutions provider, or a change that's pulled through by the end users that actually are part of the system itself, people who work in the system?
Well, that's a nice leading question. So generally we find, looking at the case studies and so on, and some of the analysis that's been done by people in this area, that in general kind of pull-based change, where you can think about this as end users, so people who are going to have to use the technology or the change in organizational process or new infrastructure or so on, are involved in that initial scoping of the aims of the change, the design and so on. They have input to that, and they're able to help drive that change. So they take ownership maybe of the project team, so they're leading that, or they have large levels of end user involvement through workshops or other scoping exercises they go through. And crucially, in the handover and delivery stage, tend to have better outcomes than those where we essentially abdicate responsibility to experts we bring in, whether that's technology experts, engineers, architects, specialist HR consultants, whoever it might be, who are then disconnected from the end users and the other stakeholders as well, may design a solution that on paper is technically perfect and very well suited. But even the best designs, if they're disconnected from those end users, we tend to find worse outcomes. People don't feel they have a stake, they're not involved in that kind of handover. And the bit that comes, so if we're making a change, it's going to have an impact on those within the system, and maybe unintended consequences as well. Mm-hmm. Yes. So having people built in from the start tends to...
Yeah, I was going to add to that. So that in the work I've been involved with, there has sort of been two key related issues. One is define our end users. So the person that we think is using the kit is not necessarily the person.
Well, I guess it could be the distinction between maybe the patient, maybe their carers, doctors, nurses, and so on. Because I guess the patient may not be the person actually using telehealth.
And so for instance, so it can be really important to identify who the stakeholders are, and then to speak to those stakeholders and actually understand what they want from the design.
And I think thinking about within organisational systems in particular, it can be interesting. So thinking about some of my work in terms of looking at workspace design and building design, is that actually quite often there might be things that designers and managers just are not aware of. So things which really impact on the end user, but that wouldn't come up within a formal design process. So maybe in terms of particular storage needs that people have, or the way that an office is set up to help facilitate basic information sharing between teams, so that it's hard to capture without talking to those involved in the process. And thinking in terms of how people respond to change as well, quite often just having input into fairly low level decisions that maybe don't have much of an impact for the organisation. So it might be in terms of thinking about picking particular items of furniture, may all be the same kind of price and spec, but actually the colour or some of the form factor can really matter to people and give them a sense of control. And thinking about people in particular, we know from psychology that control and that sense of control, whether it's over your personal life, your job, your tasks and so on, is so important and linked to all sorts of outcomes to do with well-being and job satisfaction and others, that the more we can build in that sense of control and participation, even if it's over what as designers or managers we may think are trivial factors, they can have a real impact on those involved in that process.
And just to tie it all together, when you think about a pull project and control, if you think about low levels of control, there's correlations to burnout, stress, and ultimately people leaving the organization. So that can affect their retaining knowledge. It costs, costs tons of money to replace someone.
Yeah, and also using a system. So if you have a system that's actually not complete, people don't have to use, but you'd like them to use, then the best way to encourage them to use that is to help make them feel like they've been involved in the design of it and involved in the.
And to understand where maybe the training needs are, or where kind of processes maybe need to be refined as well, because this can be a really virtuous cycle in terms of reevaluating how things are done, how maybe groups are organised and structured, or even rewarded and so on. Yeah. So you can think about how a change to a process or an IT system might actually change the way you need to pay people.
Yeah.
So you might shift from paying people at an individual level to rewarding them for group outcomes, so maybe project run times or quality and so on. And all these things can be linked together. Yeah. And if you miss that, then you might have a really poor outcome.